Hello and welcome to Lynchburg Live. I'm your host, Linda Smith. My guest tonight is Noreen Turyn, WSET TV's senior anchor and managing editor. Noreen is also the recipient of a number of journalism awards, and she'll be talking to us tonight about her job at WSET and her successful career as a journalist. So wonderful to have you here tonight, Noreen.
Thanks for having me.
I think everybody who has a television and turns it on and sees WSET knows your face because you've been with WSET for a while. You do such a wonderful job, and I think that my audience would like to know a little bit about you.
Well, thank you.
Like, where were
20
you?
and a half years.
That long?
Yes.
Doesn't seem that long.
No, it doesn't.
Where were you born?
I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, but I lived there for about 6 months, so I don't really know St. Louis. My father was in the FBI, and so we moved a lot of different places. And so I remember most a little bit of Buffalo, New York, Long Island, New York, and then Maryland, where my family currently lives.
So you've been around.
I've been around to a lot of different places.
Have you always been interested in television and the media as a career choice?
No, it wasn't my first career choice, actually. In high school, I had really decided I wanted to be an architect, and I took an architectural drawing class in high school and designed a house and built it its model. And I was the only girl in the class, and I loved it. And I wanted to go to University of Maryland, though, and University of Maryland only accepted a few architecture students. Very small amount. It was a very competitive program. My parents, though, my sisters, everybody had gone to Maryland, so that's where I wanted to go. So I thought, well, I'll go to University of Maryland and then try to transfer into the architecture program. But while I was there, then just for fun, just for an extracurricular activity, I tried out for the campus radio station as a DJ, and I made it. And I had a horrible shift and everything for a freshman college student. You know, you don't want to be working the Friday night shift, but right. I got that. But anyway, there I learned about journalism. There were there was a news, section, people doing news for the radio, and so I thought, oh, well, that would be something. And so my junior year, right before my junior year, actually, is when I changed my major to journalism and decided I wanted to go into news business.
I was going to ask you if there was any major event or one person that led you down this path, but you
not really. I mean, I look back though now, and I realize I was always the one raising my hand in class, running to the board. I wanted to write up the dittos. I did a TV little, if you want to call it, a semi-news program in the high school cafeteria at lunch. I was kind of always going this course without realizing it, and so it just made sense eventually.
That's wonderful. What kind of educational background do you have to do what you do?
I'd like to say you have to have, a college degree, and most people do.
Right.
But if you look at Peter Jennings, who was highly successful, he didn't have a college degree. So it can happen, but it's definitely preferred that most people have a college degree. You need to learn a lot of different subjects, not just journalism. You have to have a good broad base to know what you're reporting about. English, grammar especially is important. I majored in journalism and that, but you need to know history and politics and geography. You need to kind of understand the world around you in order to be a better journalist.
I'm sure you do. All right, were you in a media job before you came to Lynchburg?
Yes, I worked behind the scenes in both Baltimore and Washington TV stations. And I was a radio news stringer in Florida for a while. I got paid by the story. So I've been, working behind the scenes before. My first on-air news television reporting job was Lynchburg.
When did you come? You said 20 years ago
1990,
that you came.
February.
What made you make the decision to come here, to choose Lynchburg?
Well, I was working in Baltimore at the time, and I knew that I really wanted to do this. I got, had my foot in the door, and I was learning the business, but I knew I wanted to be on air, and Baltimore is not where you're going to break in. They're experienced people there. So I got some resume tapes together and sent them out. And my boyfriend at the time told me about Lynchburg. He had graduated from Lynchburg College, and he said, there's a TV station there. And so I just sent my tape here as, among several other places. And this is the place that said, yeah, we'll hire you. So I was like, okay, I'm moving to Lynchburg then.
So you were immediately hired by WSET?
I wouldn't say immediately. I sent my tapes a few places. Well, right, they came in, I came for the interview, it was so different from Baltimore, you know, where it's a huge news operation.
Right.
It was kind of surprising to me, you know, you have one live truck, and, you know, but you get used to it, and now we've, of course, grown a lot. But, yeah, I was very grateful to get my first on-air opportunity here.
I'm sure you have seen a lot of growth with this local station in 20 years.
Oh, definitely. We've, I think, improved leaps and bounds in our quality, in our equipment, in our talent, in
I
our
think so.
reporters, yes.
My husband would tell you I'm a news hound. I watch the news all the time. After a while, it starts to drive him crazy, but it is something that I enjoy.
I'm glad you do.
I really do. What's involved with the job that you do now?
Well, I am senior anchor and managing editor. I run the morning meeting. We have a morning editorial meeting at 9:30 every morning, and this is where we go around the table and get everybody's story pitches, you know, what's going on today, what have you been hearing out on the streets, what's a big news story, what are our viewers going to be interested in. So I run that meeting and help make the decisions. I don't have the, you know, I'm not the only one with a final say, but I certainly have a big voice in, I think this one is a valuable story and this one is a valuable story, and I don't think a soul will care at all about this one, let's not even bother covering it. And so I kind of run the morning meeting, and then I work with the reporters all day long on the telephone. What do you have? Do you have this lined up? Is it working out? Or do we need to go to a plan B? Did you ask them this? Did you ask them that? You know, how are we focusing this? You know, and let's still make sure this story, what we've got at the end product, matters to our viewer. You know, that we've answered all the questions that I think a viewer would have.
So you're really putting it together as you go.
That's correct. So by 6 o'clock when I'm sitting on the news desk, I pretty much know every story inside and out. I know how it developed all day. I know maybe facts that weren't even in the story because we couldn't fit them and they're not all that crucial. But, you know, so I feel really confident when I'm sitting on the news at 6 o'clock that I know what every story is about because I've been working in it all day long.
So your day, you have a long day.
Well, no longer than everybody else, really. I work 9:30 to 6:30 are my set hours. I get in there earlier and I leave a little later typically, but those are the hours I have to be there. It's a 9-hour day and we get a break for lunch, if you can take it.
I know all about that. Working in the operating room, was if you could take it.
Election day, though, that's a 9:30 to 11:30 at night day. You know?
I'm sure it is. All right. One of the things that I find fascinating about you and your career is the number of journalism awards that you've won. Could you tell us about that? Just sort of a...
Well, yes. The one that was just pretty amazing to me and, really, I couldn't believe it, was the National Scripps Howard Award for Journalism. They just pick, 2 categories out of all the entries from across the country to win. And I was one of the winners. And this was for a series that I did, and I know you're familiar with it, on eugenics. And that is the practice that they used to have of sterilizing what they considered to be mental misfits. Right. They didn't want imbeciles, as the written text in this whole law is documented, imbeciles to breed imbeciles. So they would say, we think this person is mentally unfit, we're going to take them in and sterilize them, and it was a big process, a lot done at what is now the Central Virginia Training Center, but back then was called the Lynchburg Colony, and they sterilized people up through the 70s. I mean, it's not just something that was done way back when, up through the 70s, and so I wasn't the first person to ever do a story on this subject, but my story did lead some local activists to get angry that this had happened and that no apology. These people were out there, without ever being able to have children. They were perfectly stable members of our society.
And it was actually sanctioned by the state of Virginia.
Sanctioned. Right. And in fact, Hitler looked at this country's laws and Virginia's laws and said, hey, that's a great idea. I'll do that over here. So it was state sanctioned and a very bad practice. And eventually the activists who had seen it called lawmakers, got action. They got a statement of regret and then finally pushed their way to a full apology from then Governor Mark Warner. That doesn't bring their lives back, but it does give them a little bit of validation that that was wrong, what we did to you. Right. And so it was it won this national award. I was thrilled. I couldn't believe that. It just made you really realize that what you do can make a difference when you see that the snowball effect of how this, you know, made a state apology and, you know, got this national award, and, you know, you're just like, wow, you've got to be careful with that power.
But I think that's so to your credit that you approached this, you went through with it, and got that apology from the governor. I think that's so special. And just listening to you talk, you know, when I was coming along as a student nurse back in that era, it was just assumed and taken for granted that this is the way things were done.
Yeah.
And you just, I don't know, it's just.
And many of them did not know this was happening
Right.
to them. They were saying, doctors were saying, oh, you need a procedure, you're ill. Oh, okay, you know. And they didn't know this was happening to them. Some of them found out way later in their adult lives that they had been sterilized, and unbeknownst to them, it was just horrible.
And I think some of those people were not really, the diagnosis they had was not
quite
right,
accurate.
Right, not accurate. And so there were some people there who had this happen to them who could have been functional people in the community.
Correct.
And that's what's sad, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Right, you did another series, and I think you won an award for your series on Lyme disease.
Mm-hmm.
And as a nurse, I'm particularly interested in that and how well it went. And
boy, I worked hard on that series. If anybody, I'm sure there are people here who have not seen it, but it is still posted online on WSET.com because it is used across the country as a resource when people are trying to find out what's wrong with them. A Google search brings this up, and they read it and they say, "Oh my goodness, thank you." I had personally spent 5 years ignoring symptoms that I had of pain and fatigue and even other symptoms that I didn't realize were connected. And finally, I went to a doctor and said, "Look, I just hurt all the time, and I'm always tired." And I'm going to make a very, very long story short, but my sister had Lyme disease, and finally, at some point, I told her, I went to the doctor, I'm just tired and I have pain, and she perked up and said, "Excuse me? Do you know you could have Lyme disease?" I said, "Oh, Lori, just because you had Lyme disease doesn't mean that's what this is." She said, "You know what? You need to go rule it out." And so she saved me a lot of time and effort that so many Lyme patients don't have the luxury of a sister
Right.
telling them to go get this checked. They just don't know what's wrong with them. They're getting misdiagnosed all over the place with multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia,
Thyroid disease, I'm sure, is in there too.
all kinds of things that, in the bottom line, they probably have Lyme disease, and antibiotics could help them, or some other kind of herbal care. There are a variety out there. But the controversy then I uncovered, I set out to do a series on don't ignore your symptoms before it's too late, because I ignored mine, and it turns out it wasn't just my bed was bad for me or my purse was too heavy.
Right.
It was that I had Lyme disease. And I learned as I was doing it then that there's this huge controversy over treatments for Lyme disease. And the Infectious Diseases Society says you need 2 to 4 weeks of antibiotics and that you're cured, and that after that, even if you have all the still symptoms, you're still cured and you'll just have to take Advil. And then there's another group that says, no, no, no. If it's been in your system for a long time, it may take years
Right.
of antibiotics, different kinds, different treatments, hitting it different ways before you could ever get it out of your system, because it is feisty, and it will attack things, and it will attach to things, and it will hide from things, and so they say this 2 to 4 weeks thing is wrong. So it's a very powerful controversy out there that is still a battle being fought. So I set out to do this series, and I ended up telling people, get it checked out, go find a doctor who is able to properly diagnose you from your symptoms, because the Lyme tests aren't accurate, and then decide for yourself if you want to go this 2 to 4 route, or if you want to find these doctors who believe something else. So it was just an informational process out there, and I feel very, very proud of it. It was a lot of work, and I was in the midst of the worst pain and agony and exhaustion from Lyme disease when I was putting it together.
And that probably drove you.
It drove
to a degree.
me. I took a lot of vacation days off in October and worked on my series on my vacation days at home, because in the October before I did
Right.
that. I took some long weekends and things. I brought tape machines home to log the tapes, and I worked on my own time
That's
because
great.